I'm just gonna ask like a simple question for the first one. You're a singer. How long have you been singing for?
Oh goodness. I feel like I've been singing since I could talk, really. My mom always tells this story of, one time she was driving around with the choir director and we were listening to something like a gospel song or something on the radio, and he was like, she's copying the runs. Like, I was in my little high chair and he was like, she's like doing the runs, like she's doing them. And like, I've always sang, and then I kind of was like, this is really what I want to do when I was like 9 or 10. So I've been singing for quite some time.
I like that you started out singing like in the church and that you have some gospel influences growing up. Do you feel like a lot of gospel influences still come out in your music today?
If anything, I feel like sometimes it's the artists that I listen to were also influenced by gospel. So I think like the culmination of being somebody who always loved R&B music and R&B singers, and being somebody who was just always kind of around gospel, just kind of filtered into me and my influences now.
I love it. So it like
Yeah,
incubated to your spirit,
into
and now
my
it's coming
soul.
out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yolanda Adams, all those people just bestowed their blessings upon me. And yeah.
And like even just going back to like being in choir, like that's like a musical community. I feel like that's even a big reason why a lot of people love going to church. And so like how important is community for you in music?
It is important. It's so weird because I've always grappled with this thing of being a person who's kind of independent, just feeling like if I mess up, at least I know it'll be on me, as opposed to me having to like, depending on others is sometimes it feels hard, but it's so necessary, because sometimes you feel like other people will stop you from succeeding. But I think you can't forget just how much other people can help you succeed too, like how much people encouraging you, having those people, especially gospel people are crazy. They threaten, like having somebody threaten to throw their shoe at you is like the highest honor. And just like, especially, I went to college for music, and, getting feedback from other great musicians who I was like, oh, wow, he can really play and write. And then them being like, well, wow, you're no slouch yourself. Like having those kind of musical communities is so like great, and just helps you grow and makes you feel good about what you're doing, knowing that somebody else appreciates it as well.
Thanks for sharing. That's beautiful. And I didn't know that you went to school for music. Where did you go to school again?
I went to Columbia College in Chicago.
Nice. And so I guess my next question is for those like younger kids who may not have had access to those communities like you did. Like, what's some advice that you would give to a young artist that wants to get their feet wet like you are now?
I think there's just so many ways in which to do it, like especially with the rise of the internet. Like I think when you're young, people are very willing to help you and stuff like that. And, kind of going out into the world and making that be your education too. Like going to the open mics if you're old enough, going online and seeing what you can glean. There's a musical professor who does videos about music theory that you can glean knowledge from. Like there's definitely resources with the coming age that you can go upon if you can't like afford professional schooling. Even though there's some things that are holding you back, finding the ways in which to work around, because there's always a workaround.
So like you are like heavily influenced by like gospel, and like you also have R&B. And I guess I kind of thought of like the dichotomy between those two things, because yes, they are like very much like one and the same. Um, but I feel like with gospel, there's like a lot of messages of like hope and like faith. Whereas like R&B, it's kind of like your hope and faith has been lost because you've been heartbroken. And so I guess like within the songs that like you write, do you write about like hopeful love, or are you more like a hopeless romantic love?
I think it's a variety. Like one thing somebody that I'm close to, I was telling them that like R&B, I've always loved it because, and I think the same is true of the gospel too, but it's really just about this kind of unfettered emotion, right? That's one of the beauties of kind of music in general, is just being able to put it like all on the page, all in your words. What do you want to express? Especially like you were saying, gospel and R&B really do feed off each other, where like, you know, the gospel singers were listening to R&B artists for inspiration, and like R&B singers came from gospel, and like, you know, like Ray Charles, let me see how I can remix this song that was a gospel song and turn it into this devil music, like all this stuff. So it's like, in terms of that, and I think the dramatization is kind of, I guess, at the root of it, or just this like emotion in general. Like, you know, if you think about it too, like gospel songs aren't always hopeful and uplifting. Like sometimes like, because of the blood you died so that I could live. And you know, I'm a sinner. I was a sinner, and I can't go on, but you, Lord. Like, you know, it's just a lot like of that. And then even with R&B, you'll hear a song of like, you know, I got sunshine on a cloudy day. There's always kind of crossover. There's always, you know, happiness and sadness in both. But I think the thing they have in common is like the drama and the soul and the, I don't know, the Black experience too, one could argue as well.
Come on. Yes, snaps on it, right? Since you've like started releasing like your own music, what is a common emotion that is like reflected within your music?
Oh gosh, it's weird because I write so many different kinds of songs. Like honestly, some stuff, especially I'm working on a project now where some of it's going to be kind of like a throwback, kind of like 90s, 2000 vibes, where like some of it's like happy. But I think my biggest thing that I like is kind of juxtaposition. I feel like in terms of the mixed emotions, especially like I love listening to happy songs that sound happy, but are actually like have really sad, gut wrenching lyrics, or like, or just something interesting where you're like, oh, that took a turn that I wasn't expecting. So I guess in terms of like the main emotion that comes through, I guess maybe you would say uncertainty. Like, because you just never know I kind of want to keep you on your toes with my music. You never know what's gonna happen.
I love that. That's perfect. I feel like that was kind of like a trick question that I was trying to give you. And I feel like you answered it right because, like you said, like it's hard to just like identify with one. And the fact that you said it's like juxtaposition, like it's always like sliding. I think that's so dope because that just shows like the vulnerability that you bring out in your music. So, like when you are like writing like your music and like you like want to reach out to like a really, I guess you want to cast like a wide net, like what is like a uplifting message that you want to be able to share like with everybody through your music?
Love yourself in all your flaws, in all of your like the things that you feel like you don't like about yourself. Be able to be genuine and be able to say, you know what, this is me, and they may not be perfect, they may not be 100% my full fantasy of who I want me to be, but this is me presenting myself love. Like, you know, if I'm loving myself genuinely, like, please go and love yourself and find the things that you do love about yourself in my genuineness, in my honesty that I try to portray. Like, I really just try to be genuine, like where it's like, you know, it all might be different, but it's all me. Go out there saying like, this is me and I love myself, and also reflect how I'm training myself to love myself, because it's not something that's easy. You don't just wake up one day and you're like, oh my God, I'm awesome. Like sometimes you have those days. No, I mean, you put on a nice dress, whatever. You know, it's hard work, but you know, I am working at it and I do love myself. And join me over here, the Loving Yourself team.
Right. No, self-care and like just like the journey of it is like very underrated. Like I feel like we preach like, oh, self-love, like you need to have self-love, but like we don't really equip people all the time like with the tools like on how to get there. And I'm assuming, of course, like since you are like an artist, that like making music is like a version of like self-love for you, correct?
Yeah, well, I think there's always like an archetype of what that's supposed to look like, right? Like self-care, like, oh, well, what's it supposed to it's supposed to look this way. If I love myself, that means I'm always supposed to have a smile on my face. If I love myself, that means I've always got to be positive. I can never say I hate anything. I can never say I dislike that. I can never be sad. That's not what it's about. Like it's about, again, approaching your feelings, like acknowledging them, owning them, and then learning how to cope and deal with them. there's a song that I'm writing now that's kind of just about me always like, especially up until recently, just always feeling broke, just always being broke and feeling like I'm drowning, pouring myself on a page, like, and you might feel it too. And let's, work through this. Like confronting the issue, acknowledging it is like one of the first steps to kind of bringing clarity and bringing peace. That's true self-care.
Or you have to be able to identify the problem before you can come up with a solution for it. And it seems like you've been able to like go within and like accept all of these things that you don't like and that you're uncomfortable with so that you can be able to like get to that point of writing from like a genuine place.
And I'm
So
constantly
kind of like a
working
true
on it. Every day is a new day. But like, I think as I get older, especially, and as I write more and know myself more, it gets easier and easier.
So after this whole pandemic has happened, what has your artistry been like? Like, how has your artistry been affected by the Rona?
So I think it's a lot of it's interesting because it's been more of an interest, like it's been more of an internal struggle just in terms of like now, like especially up until recently, I was lucky enough to get a temp job, but before then I was kind of like laid off, still getting paid, but laid off, feeling guilty because I felt like, oh, well, I should be using this time to create, like, and I should be super inspired, but also feeling kind of sad and panicky and not sure. And like recently I just reached this level of clarity where I always think that there has to be a timeline for my life in terms of like what people expect of me. And I think that feeling like you failed before you even begin to create can really hold you back from being able to create because you're just like, why bother? And it like, and then that's when the procrastination sets in. You're just like, oh, well, I'll just do that later because you kind of already feel like I'm about to put forth so much effort to something that's not even going to yield any results. And recently I did talk to my friend where, I kind of really began to talk to her about it because it was something I kind of like stuffed down. She was like, does music make you happy? And I came to the conclusion of like, yes, it does. But the expectations that I placed on myself and the expectations that others have placed on me makes me not want to do it sometimes. I mean, I've been creating even more than I was in the past, like with this whole pandemic, because I've had time to like really think and not really put like a deadline on myself and take it in small doses, which is something I wasn't doing before. So I think the Rona, if anything, kind of gave me a chance to reach out to my support system and then come to like a realization in my own mind about how I should be proceeding creating my art, which is not having some sort of thing of like, oh, well, if I don't have this many views and this many likes or whatever, and if I don't release my EP by this such and such a date, I failed. And so why even like, just stopping that train of thought, just being like, go to it when you feel inspired, take 5 minutes, work on this project, go do something else, like finding that balance. That's kind of what the Rona has brought to me. It's brought me back to that place of like, you love to do this. So act like you love to do this and stop making it something that it feels like you have to do.
That was such a great answer. It makes me think of like you having that self-motivation to make more realistic and tangible goals for yourself is really that skill that you had to hone in on. And I think a lot of people can use that advice. Honestly, myself too, with the work that we're doing. And like, I honestly feel the same way because this whole pandemic kind of just gave us that whole, you got to breathe. Take a second. You got to breathe. You got to take it all in and trust the process. And so thank you for sharing. And so that pretty much concludes our interview for you, Cydni. Thank you for making the time to be here with us today and answer all of the questions very gracefully the way that you did and just being real with us. All right, Cydni, bye. Take care.
Bye. Thank you.